This is a project I quilted, and when I quilted several rows, looking at the quilt very closely, I noticed I had skipped stitches on some of the leaves right along this curve area right here. So I stopped quilting. I took out the stitches that need to be removed, tied off my threads, pulled the tails in. Then I set up another quilt group, and I placed one repeat on the screen. And I got this repeat all lined up with that area on the quilt. And there are several ways that this could be done, but one way was to just place the needle at the beginning of one of the repeats and start a pattern to put that repeat on the screen. Now, I only needed to quilt this one area here. I needed to quilt from this point up to this point on this leaf. So what I did was I right clicked, I selected divide pattern, then I have a node here and a node here, and I just deleted all the rest of the pattern. Now notice this is still here, but I can delete it. I'll select it, delete it. Now I only have this part of this pattern left. That's all I want to stitch. And I have found that I could use relocate, shift all to 2 points, or I could use, as I saw in one of Al's videos, by placing a check mark where I want using P2P line, where I want the quilting to start, and place one where I want the quilting to stop. So I'm going to select the point-to-point icon, and it's set on point-to-point line. Then I'm going to click a point where I want the stitching to start, and I'm going to make one of these at the point where I want the stitching to stop. I'll just put the needle where I want the stitching to stop, click, move off, click, move again, click, and each time I do this I hit the stop button, and that completes that one P2P check mark. See, here I have one here and I have one here. And what I'm going to do is toggle those two P2P lines as sewn. Right click, toggle it as sewn. Down here, right click, toggle it as sewn. Now that only leaves me this area right here. And what I want to do is make sure that this end of this is connected to the end of this P2P line, and the same thing up here. So I'll select it, I'll turn on the end anchors, and I'm going to turn on the end snap, and you can hear it as it snaps. Now I have those end points snapped to those P2P lines. Now all I need to do is click quilt, make sure it starts exactly where I want it to. I may slow down my machine as it stitches up through here and I may take my hand and make sure that it connects right to that point where I picked the stitches out. So now I'm going to hit quilt, and it moved to the point that looks good. I'll click OK. It'll start stitching, and I'll just slow the machine down and watch it. And it's going to connect exactly where I want it to connect. All I need to do now is pull up my bobbin thread and cut the threads. Now I have my leaf pattern stitched back in without any skip stitches. I'll go and do this to every area on the quilt that needs to have the stitches replaced. Now I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to delete it. And again, I noticed that at the end of one row, I had on the back I had bad stitches, and I had to pick those out. So I put a repeat on the screen, on the CAD screen, and again I lined it all up. Notice that this part right here on the back of the quilt on one row had bad stitches, so I had to remove those. And again, I'm going to divide this pattern, and I want to divide it at this point right here, because the only thing I want is this left. I'm going to delete everything else, and again I'm going to go to that point where I want the stitching to start, and I'm going to use P to P line, and I'm going to put the check mark at the point where the stitching starts. So I'll click OK. I'll move my machine, click OK again, move my machine, click OK the third time, click stop, and that completes that part of that pattern. It gives me that P to P line check mark. And I'm going to go do the same thing at the other end of the stitching. Move my machine head, click OK, move the machine away, click OK, move it off in another direction, click OK again, and click stop. I'll exit out of this. Now you can see my pattern's not quite lined up the way it needs to be. And I could have used Shift All to 2 points, but I believe that this method is a little bit more precise. I'm going to toggle this as sewn, toggle this as sewn, then I'm going to click on this pattern. I'm going to sew, make sure my end anchor boxes are on, the end snap is on, and I'll just move this, snap it to the end of that P to P line. Now I'm all set. I'm ready to stitch. So I would just go and hit quilt and let it stitch that portion. That's two different situations you can run into. I'm going to select and delete all of this. Now, suppose I have a totally different circumstance. Maybe somewhere in the middle of this, I have an area that needs the stitching removed and restitched. So I'm going to put my pattern on the screen, change my reference point here to start point. Then suppose that part of this has some stitches somewhere in this area, and I don't want to remove all of these stitches, say from this peak all the way around and down to this one. I only need to stitch right in here. Well, I pick the stitches out, tie the threads, pull them in, then I take where those end points are, I put my machine there, and again I'm going to put my two P2P check marks so that I have something to anchor my portion of my pattern that's going to be left. So here I click, and I move the machine, click, move it, click, hit stop. Then I go to the other area, click OK, click OK, click OK, click stop, exit. Now again, you can see I have some reference points. So I'm going to select this, just the P2P line. I'm going to toggle it as sewn. Same thing with this one. Toggle it as sewn. Now I'm going to take and divide this pattern because I want this part of this pattern left. So I'll right click, select divide pattern. Okay, notice there's not a node exactly where I want it, but I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here. I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of this. Now I still need to shorten this slightly. In CS4 I can select this part of this pattern, and I can convert it, pattern to curve. Then when I click on it, notice I have many nodes that I can divide this pattern. There's one that's really close to what I want. Click that. Click this part, delete it. I go up to this one. When I click on it, I'll get my nodes to divide it. I'm going to divide it right here. Click on this, delete it. Now I'm going to select this. I'm going to escape to exit out of the divide mode. My end snap is on, my end anchors are on. All I'm going to do is bring this down to get my end anchors on. And I'll go to the other end and I'll do the same thing. Now I'm ready to sew this section of this pattern back into place. And like I said, when I hit quilt, I'll make sure that the needle goes to the correct point here to start. If I need to, I'll guide it by hand a little bit. Then I'll slow the machine down, let it stitch, and as it approaches this, I'll guide it and make sure it connects to this point where it needs to stop. So that's 3 different situations you can encounter in needing to rip out stitches, line up the pattern, and restitch an area and it does work very easily.